Senate will come to order for February 28th. Roll call, please.
Legislative Day number 11, Monday, February 28th. Roll call. Anderson. Here. Baldwin. Here. Beitman. Here. Boner. Here. Bouchard. Here. Case. Present. Cooper. Here. Driscoll. Here. Ellis. Present. French. Here. Furphy. Here. Garou. Here. Hicks. Here. Hutchings. Here. James. Here. Kinski. Here. Kolb. Present. Cost. Here. Landon. Here. McEwen. Here. Nethercott. Pappas. Here. Perkins. Here. Rothfuss. Here. Salazar. Here. Schuler. Here. Scott. Here. Steinmetz. Here. Wasserberger. Here. President Dockstetter.
Here.
30 present.
Our chaplain of the day is Pastor Micah Labovich of the Cheyenne Evangelical Free Church. We'd invite him to share a prayer with us now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sovereign Lord, as we continue to gather here this morning, especially as I stand before those whose role is so critical in the future of our state and nation, we are humbled. As we face continued turmoil in the world at large, we are humbled. As we reflect upon the committees of this morning and the past weeks and the cries of those in our state, we are humbled. Lord, we are merely servants, and not just servants of those who have elected us or nominated us or appointed us. Rather, Lord, in the end of all things, we will be accountable to you. And we confess that we fall short of that. As we again look around us, we confess we are limited. Our perception is foggy at best, and we need clarity that can only be found in you. So I plead, on behalf of those leaders surrounding me, have mercy upon us and guide us. Fill in the gap. Compensate for our weaknesses. Cause us to lean hard on your sovereign love and will. Break us where we must be broken. Challenge us where we must be challenged. And continually rebuild us in this good state of Wyoming and the knowledge and love that you have given. And let us rest knowing that ultimately, at the end of the day, you are in control. Lord, we give you control. And we ask you in the authority that you have given all those present that your will be done for your glory and that all may know you. Amen.
Pastor, Senator French, would you lead us in the pledge? Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will the reading clerk please read in the Journal Committee report?
Mr. President, your Journal Committee reports that the Journal of February 25, 2022 has been read and recommends that it be approved. Senator Kolb, Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any objections? There being none, the report is adopted. Dr. Brian Gee of Lander is our doctor. Would you step up and we'll acknowledge you and stand for you. Thank you. Am I pronouncing your last name right, sir? Thank you, doctor. Do we need a correction on your last name? Okay. So thank you for clarifying that, and thank you for coming to Cheyenne to keep us healthy. Oh, Senator Case from your home country would like to say a couple words. Senator.
I finally got this guy where I want him. Mr. President, Dr. G is just a delightful physician in Lander. He's worked in our emergency room, and I can testify firsthand. Remember when I told that story on Friday? Part of it was where the tree snuck on me, Mr. Chairman. Kind of looked like I came out of a maybe a cowboy and Indian kind of thing, you know, and my head was laid open like that. And He spent hours sewing me up, and you can't even tell. He's a very good stitcher, very kind man, and he waived part of his bill on that deal, and I've never been able to pay him back. This man is a true humanitarian and an asset to Lander, and thank you. Good to see you, good doctor. Yeah.
Thank you, Doctor, for putting our good Senator case back together again. Senator Boner,
Thank you, Mr. President. May I have privilege of the floor?
please do.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think it was on Thursday, I've asked you for some prayers for two of my constituents who were caught in the middle of a major land war in Europe. I'd just like to update the body and let you know that they were able to get out there in Warsaw right now doing their paperwork. And so hopefully that doesn't take too long. They're able to expeditiously leave Odessa, and they're safe now. So thanks for all your prayers. It really did make a difference.
All right.
Thank you. Senator, we appreciate the update. Seeing a lot of pictures, a lot of folks running for safety. Senator Schuler,
Thank you, Mr. President. May I have the privilege of the floor?
please do.
Thank you so much. Today, I'd like to introduce a very important member of our community, Pastor Jonathan Lang, who's up in the stands. He's just done a great job in our community for in a lot of different reasons. Not all of them that I can't mention today, but he's just a great guy. I'd like to introduce him. He's up in this gallery up here. Thank you.
Welcome to Senate. Any other privileges? Dr. Reverend Lang, thanks for being here, Pastor Lang. I've had a chance to meet with you too, and you're a good man. Okay, let's, a couple of notes here. Today in Wyoming history, February 28th to March 5th, 2022, Wyoming Governor Mark Gordon has issued an official proclamation declaring the week of February 28th as Wyoming Agricultural Literacy Week. While we recognize the value of reading and agriculture during this designated week, it goes without saying that each of these are vital every day of the year. Quote for the day: "It is not where you came from, it's where you're going that counts." Ella Fitzgerald. Session status: today is the last day for the second reading in the House of Origin. And reminder that this Friday, all interim topics must be submitted via the online form to LSO by 4 p.m. And another note, I've been around and visited with you on the governor's conference appointments, conferees, and if I missed you, would you check your computer both at the end of the week and this week? I've had Linda send out updates on where we are with those appointments, and we're going to try to caucus for just shortly sometime today, working with the floor leader, so that we can go over those appointments and get those back to the governor. Okay. Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I have personal privilege?
Please do.
Thank you. Senators, I want to acknowledge we've got a group of students from Wyoming Virtual Academy. Wyoming Virtual Academy is just that, a lot of online learning. They're accompanied by their teacher, Chris Divden. And so let's welcome them to the Senate chamber. Thanks so much for being here.
Welcome to the Senate. And I believe Senator Scott had something. He was standing behind you, but now he has disappeared. All right. Let's proceed then. Messages from the House.
From the House of Representatives, February 25, 2022. Mr. President, the following bills passed the House on third reading in an amended form. Message number 136, House Bill 3, State Land Leases, ayes 57, excused 3. Message number 143, House Bill number 1, General Government Appropriations 2, ayes 41, noes 14, excused 5. Signed, Wendy Harding, House Chief Clerk.
Thank you. Message reports from standing committees.
February 25, 2022, Mr. Presidential Committee Number 4, Education, to whom was referred House Bill 30, School Finance Increasing Cash Reserves. Respectfully reports same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Weidman, Ellis, Rothfuss, Salazar, and Scott. Senator Scott, Chairman. February 25, 2022, Mr. Presidential Committee Number 9, Minerals, Business, and Economic Development, to whom was referred House Bill 45, Mine Reclamation Bonding, Voluntary Assigned Trust. Respectfully reports same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Beitman, Cooper, Rothfuss, and Wasserberger. Senator Anderson, Chairman. February 25, 2022, Mr. Presidential Committee Number 9, Minerals, Business, and Economic Development, to whom was referred House Bill 46, Partnership Challenge Loan Program Amendments. Respectfully reports same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Beitman, Cooper, Rothfuss, and Wasserberger. Senator Anderson, Chairman.
Great, thank you. Bills on second reading. Senator Case, could we have a little help here?
You bet, Mr. President, but I think we have to read it in first.
Please read it in. Senate Joint Resolution 2, for second reading of the joint resolution.
Senate Joint Resolution 2, Senior Citizen Property Tax Relief Constitutional Amendment, sponsored by Senator Dockstader.
Senator Case?
Mr. President, I would request that Senate Joint Resolution 2 be laid back for one more day. We're working on an amendment.
Thank you. Appreciate your help, Mr. Chairman, and folks just working with the best minds here on the floor to get that correct. Thank you.
Absent objection.
Absent objection, we ask that be laid back. Thank you. Senator Perkins.
Mr. President, I'm just wondering a little bit. We just laid that back one day, but you just announced a minute ago that that bills on second reading, the day was the last day for bills on second reading. If we lay it back, does that not kill the bill? Unless you want me not to stand up and say that. Yeah. Do you guys need to huddle for a minute? Just you and the president and the vice president.
Yeah, right. So I think what we're going to do, yes, we can keep it in the system, according to the clerk, one more day, and then that still moves it into third, because it's already in. Senator Case, did you have something to add to that?
Mr. Chairman, we could work on this and do it as a third reading amendment, if that's what you're
Okay.
talking about. So I would withdraw my request, and let's just take it to third and fix it between now and third.
Okay, so put it up on second.
Yep.
All right. Senator Perkins.
Mr. President, I think you need to take the bill and read it and send it to third reading if that's what we're going to do.
We've read it. We've read it in.
And then do you have to make the pronouncement, Mr. President? Without objection?
Yeah, said that. Said without objection. Okay, without objection. We'll move it through. Senator Scott.
Mr. President, this proposed constitutional amendment, would it be possible to lay it back till after lunch today so we could see what the possible change to the constitutional amendment was, so we'd have it on second reading and then a possibility for adjustment on third tomorrow?
We could lay it back, absent objection. It's been read in.
If, Mr. President, I was thinking if we could lay it back specifically till right after lunch, that might be the better way to handle a constitutional amendment if we could be ready by then.
Senator Case, you want to weigh in?
Mr. President, I've looked at your proposed new language, and I have just a small suggestion to add to that. So I think this is very doable. So if we just
lay it back
till this afternoon.
Thank you. Absent objection, we'll lay this back until this afternoon. Thank you, folks. Bills on third reading and final passage. Senator Driscoll, do you have a consent list?
Mr. Chairman, I do. Mr. President, I do. Mr. President, I move third reading consent list, bills as follows. This is the consent list, so. Senate File 11, display a state flag. Senate File 41, expanding next generation 911. Senate File 50, government waste, fraud, abuse, and whistleblower. It's 50 pulled up. I don't have the list.
Senate File 55. If you'll stand back for just a minute.
I've got it.
Okay, let's have you start over.
Start over again. Mr.
For the
President,
record.
we have a consent list. I move for adoption of this following Senate file. Senate File 11, display a state flag. Senate File 41, expanding next generation 911. Senate File 55, insurance sandbox. Senate File 56, lottery amendments. Senate File 62, Civics Transparency Act. Senate File 76, financial exploitation of vulnerable adults. Senate File 77, name change, duration of residency requirement. Senate File 78, language proficiency, seal of biliteracy. Senate File 80, omnibus water bill construction. Senate File 81, clarification of existing state ownership of groundwater. Senate File 82, supplemental water development funding. Senate File 84, mineral royalties, proportional severance tax release. Senate File 85, child care facility certification exemption. Senate File 86, wildfires, one call exemption. Senate File 92, driver's license or ID card renewal or extension exception. Senate File 100, stocking amendments. Senate File 106, Wyoming Stable Token Act.
Would anybody like any of these bills removed from the list? Senator Hicks?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to have Senate File 50, government waste, fraud, abuse, and whistleblower protections removed from the list.
It's already on.
It's not on the list, sir.
All right.
Okay, let's go to
Beat me
Senator
the
Case.
punch.
Senator Case? Please do, go ahead. Oh,
Green light if I could. Senate File 84, I believe that was on the list. I'd like to have it pulled off.
removed, okay. Senator Scott?
Mr. President, I'd ask that Senate File 55, Insurance Sandbox, and Senate File 106, Wyoming Stable Token Act be removed from the consent list.
Objection, Senate File 55. Would you give me that second number, Senator Scott?
Senate File 106, Wyoming
106.
Stable Token Act.
Removed from the list, Senate File 55 and Senate File 106. Any further to be removed from the list? Any further? Okay. Senate Files, Senate File 11, Senate File 41, Senate File 56, Senate File 62, Senate File 76, Senate File 77, Senate File 78, Senate File 80, Senate File 81, Senate File 82, Senate File 85, Senate File 86, Senate File 92, Senate File 100. Having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bills pass? Chief Clerk will call the roll.
On the consent list, Anderson, Baldwin, Beitman, Boner, Bouchard, Case, Cooper, Driscoll, Ellis, French, Murphy, Guru, Hicks, Hutchings, James, Kinski, Kolb, Cost, Landon, McEwen, Nethercott, Pappas, Perkins, Rothfuss, Salzar, Schuler, Scott, Steinmetz, Wasserberger, President Dockstetter. On the consent list, 30 aye. Senate File 11, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 11, 30I. Senate File 41, are there any changes? Case I to know. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 41, 29 aye, 1 no. Senate File 55. I apologize, that has been removed. Senate File 56, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 56, 30 aye. Senate File 62, are there any changes? Wasserberger? Aye to no. Cooper? Aye to no. Cost? Aye to no. Schuler? Aye to no. Pappas? Aye to no. Boner? Boner, aye to no. Rothfuss? Aye to no. Case? Aye to no. Landon, aye to no. Guru? Aye to no. Murphy? Aye to no. Baldwin, aye to no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 62, 18 aye, 12 no. Senate File 76, are there any changes? Nethercott, no. Perkins, aye to no. Driscoll, aye to no. Kolb, aye to no. Cooper, aye to no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 76, 25 aye, 5 no. Senate File 77, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 77, 30 aye. Senate File 78, are there any changes? Case I to no. Could you stand, please? Thank you. French, I to no. Driscoll, I to no. Hicks, I to no. Closing vote. Kolb, I to no. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 78, 25 aye, 5 no. Senate File 80, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 80, 30 aye. Senate File 81, are there any changes? Case I to no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 81, 29 aye, 1 no. Senate File 82, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 82, 30I. Senate File 85, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 85, 30I. Senate File 86, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 86, 30I. Senate File 92, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 92, 30I. Senate File 100, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 100, 30I.
Senate Files 11, 41, 56, 62, 76, 77, 78, 80, 81, 82, 85, 86, 92, and 100, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of members elected to the Senate. Those Senate files have passed the Senate. I'll review that list one more time. Senate File 11, 41, 56, 62, 76, 77, 78, 80, 81, 82, 85, 86, 92, and 100. Once again, they have passed third reading in the Senate. Bills on third reading and final passage. Senate File 50, third reading of the Senate file. Please read it in.
Senate File 50, Government Waste, Fraud, Abuse, and Whistleblower Protection, sponsored by Senator James, an act relating to the administration of government.
Senate File 50 have been read 3 separate times. Discussion, Senator Scott. Go ahead, Senator James.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I could have this laid back for one day.
Okay, I think we can do that. Absent objection, Senate File 50 will be laid back for one day. Everybody catch that? Okay. Senate File 55, third reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 55, Insurance Sandbox, sponsored by the Blockchain Committee, an act relating to insurance.
Senator Scott.
Mr. President, I ask this be pulled off the consent list. And Mr. President, my thinking is we've used this sandbox concept a few times in recent years, but mostly I believe on things where we're trying some kind of technical innovation, often in the healthcare area, where Wyoming produces a circumstance that makes a lot of sense to try some innovations, and maybe we can get somewhere with it. This one is different. Insurance is a product that is uniquely vulnerable to fraud problems because you pay for it in one time period, and then if certain events happen, you may collect on it in another time period, but only if those events happen. And, you know, it's insurance. We're protecting ourselves against unusual events. And we've developed quite a body of law, Mr. President, in the insurance code to prevent the various frauds that earlier experience showed happened. Now, they were mostly stuff done 100 years ago or more, but that protection has stood the test of time. Frankly, Mr. President, in this area, I am nervous about a proposal that would suspend some of the protections that are in the insurance code, and afraid that we may simply discover some of the reasons those protections were there. And I'm also nervous that where we're dealing with somebody who's taking advantage of Sandbox, that we'll see the benefits of it, but you'll not see, because they are honest, you'll not see what abuses can happen. So for those reasons, Mr. President, I think we would be better off not passing this bill.
Further discussion. This is on Senate File 55. Further discussion. All right. Senator Nethercott.
Hard. Thank you, Mr. President. To respond to those concerns, I think it's really important to recognize that this sandbox period is limited to, if you look at the bill, to 24 months. So page 1, paragraph 5, the sandbox period means the period of time initially not longer than 24 months in which the commissioner, which would be the insurance commissioner. So the interim committee, the select committee, heard from the Department of Insurance throughout the entire interim. They were present for this bill. This bill was not crafted without their participation and input, recognizing their concerns for the consumers of this state, their concerns for the integrity of their department. So again, the sandbox period is limited in scope to a duration and time of 24 months, subject to permission from the commissioner, who has allowed the innovative insurance project or service to be made available to consumers. And so, you know, good senators, I recognize the concern of the good senator from Natrona County, but I would recognize to you that this select committee certainly prides itself on ensuring that Wyoming is a place for consumers to feel safe, but also is balanced with the innovation needs to diversify our economy. So we did reach out to the subject matter experts associated with both insurance, both from the department, the state's purpose of protecting consumers, the members of the committee, and those that believe that this is an opportunity for Wyoming to diversify that economy on that front. So we believe that the bill strikes that balance, and I'd urge your favorable consideration of the bill.
Thank you. This is on Senate File 55. Any further discussion? Ready for the question? Question being called. Senate File 55, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? The chief clerk will call the roll.
Third reading roll call, Senate File 55. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Beitman? Aye. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Case? Aye. Cooper? Aye. Driscoll? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French?
Aye.
Aye. Furphy? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? No. James? Aye. Kinski? Aye. Cole? Aye. Cost? Aye. Landon? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott?
Aye.
Aye. Pappas? Aye. Perkins? Perkins?
Aye.
Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? No. Steinmetz? No. Wasserberger? Aye. President Dockstetter?
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing vote closed. Senate File 55, 27 aye, 3 no.
Senate File 55, having received the affirmative votes, the majority of the members elected the Senate. Senate File 55 has passed the Senate. Senate File 84, please read it in.
Senate File 84, Mineral Royalties Proportional Severance Tax Relief, sponsored by the Federal Natural Resource Management Committee, an act relating to severance taxes.
Senate File 55, Senator Case, 84, Senate File 84.
Mr. President, I'd like to speak against this bill. Mr. President, we have studied what the impacts are of changing our take on minerals. So minerals taxes are largely based on production, and they're largely based on the value of that production, Mr. President. And it's very certain, and we have a renowned study to show it, that over relatively small ranges, the changes in the level of what the government takes based on production-based taxes doesn't make any difference to decisions to produce, to explore, or to continue operations. I also appeal to you that the world is a very, very dramatic place right now, that our mineral taxes are going to be, our mineral industry will be so needed. And I suspect that with large price increases in carbon-based minerals around the world, especially for petroleum, that we are going to be in a good position for a while. And I appreciate the amendment that was offered previously. But I truly think that what goes up comes down. We've got to be in it for the long haul. There is a long haul war on carbon-based minerals. And frankly, they're not our minerals. They belong to the future people that sit in these chairs and reside in our state. Once the minerals are removed from the ground, we'll never get them again. I think it's important that we beef up the financial side by achieving the maximum amount of return from minerals until they are no longer capable of being produced. So I urge you to oppose this bill. It'll be good for us financially, and it'll be important to those future generations because it'll maximize Wyoming's revenues, which is what we need right now. Mr. President, in closing, I just want to point out, until very recently, we were on a huge downward spiral with respect to minerals. The amount of money that we received in federal aid from the so-called, I guess it's a four-letter initial, ARPA, I'll say it, I don't know if that's okay, ARPA funding, made up in a relatively short time what we have lost as a biennial mineral revenues since 2016. So we're not really seeing how low we are because of this big explosion of funds. And we're going to get another bump because of high oil prices. I'm glad. Give me one more boom, Mr. President. I'll try to convince you guys to do the right thing with it. But our long-term, we have to look at the long term. And this would not be advantageous. I urge you to oppose the bill.
Further discussion. We are on Senate File 84. Senator Scott.
Mr. President, in addition to the arguments you just heard against this bill, I would suggest one other to you that I'm particularly concerned about, and that is by using the mineral royalties the way this bill is proposing. What we are doing is telling to our opponents back in Washington, D.C., who in the past have tried to take all or a part of the federal mineral royalties away from us, we are telling them we don't really need those mineral royalties. We can get by without them. And I think we are running a significant risk, Mr. President, if we pass this bill, of losing all or a part of the mineral royalties we otherwise are going to get. So on and against the bill.
Further discussion. Let's go over to Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let's be clear about what we're facing here. We're not talking about a small increase in the federal royalty rate. We're talking about a 50% increase. This is meaningful. So once again, as I said, I think it was on Thursday, either this is a big deal or it isn't. We can't have it both ways. I happen to believe that this is a big deal and that we can do things to provide stability and predictability, not just for oil, gas, and coal companies and the people who work for them, our constituents, but also for our revenue streams. So I think we do need to move this bill forward. It's important to provide that stability. And as far as the we can come up with any number of fictitious scenarios to dissuade people from voting for this bill. I point out the last time our FMRs were reduced, that was due to the Budget Control Act that went into effect in January 2013. That wasn't just targeting Wyoming, it was a result of a negotiation that went well and above the question of how much of these FMRs do we get back. So let's focus on what we know, let's focus on what's real. Let's pass this bill and provide that stability. And let's make no doubt about it. These companies will still be paying more once this policy goes into effect. They're going to be paying more to the federal and state government. So this isn't just a handout. This is providing stability. On and for the bill. Hope you can support it.
All right. Ready for the question? Senator Ross.
Thank you, Mr. President. On and against the bill, and I do think that we should focus on what we know, and that is that this hasn't taken effect yet. And there will certainly be time for this legislature to react in a year's time if it does want to react to a change in the federal mineral royalty rate. When we actually know what the federal mineral royalty rate has changed to, assuming it has changed. And I think that's a worthwhile consideration. We're not in a hurry to do this. We have plenty of time to think about what the data really looks like and to understand it in the context of the circumstances when it takes place. This hasn't taken effect yet. We don't know whether it will or not. And so I think that we can be patient on this if we do support the concept. And Mr. President, I share the concerns about the fact that if we are crediting back federal mineral royalties, it is then very reasonable for the federal government in enacted legislation to say, if they don't want it, we do. That's not unreasonable. In fact, you could probably craft legislation which basically says any state that is crediting it back, we will keep that portion that they credit back. Again, very reasonable for the feds to do. They do those kinds of things all the time, much to our frustration and dismay. So I think that's something I appreciate the good tall senators raising that consideration. But, Mr. President, the final point I'd like to make is, while this is additional prospective, if it happens, revenue developed from the mineral sector through the federal mineral royalty, there's a couple of key points that I think are just important to remember. One is that it's trying to get it back to the market rate, where 12.75 is not what you get in the market, more like 16, 18%. And again, we don't know what the feds are targeting. But when it's an across-the-board increase, it doesn't hurt the industry in the same way as a local increase. If the state of Wyoming were to increase the royalty by 6% in Wyoming, that would be detrimental to industry and would change their decision-making process. They would stop locating in Wyoming, and it's very easy to project that. But Mr. President, if it's across the board throughout the country, it's only a decision about whether you're doing production in the United States or not. And we know that there are substantial reasons and justifications for doing that business in the United States. This wouldn't necessarily slow it down. But again, this is a conversation we should have when it's actually taken place based on the facts and circumstances, rather than, as the good senator pointed out, these fictitious and speculation where we don't really know what reality is. So on and against the bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
We're on Senate File 84. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Senator Boner.
For my second time as the chairman of the committee sponsoring the bill, just a few points. The whole point, once again, is stability. Part of the reason why we haven't seen as much production of oil and gas is the uncertainty with the regulatory environment. So it's important that we provide stability this year, right now. This is the second time this concept has come before this body. I don't think it's appropriate to delay because we have to provide some level of stability for our industry. Also important to point out that we're not, the way the bill works, we're not taking the FMRs and directly refunding them. This is a proportional reduction in the severance tax. That's important. It's also important to recognize the only reason we can do this is because we already have an extraordinary burden placed on these industries for our tax structure. And so when you start making that comparative analysis between even other public land states that don't have that additional cost of business, which the tax structure is part of it, price of electricity is part of it. It does make us quite a bit less competitive. It certainly makes us less competitive than other states that have significant oil development that don't have the federal nexus to the extent we do here. So I believe that this bill is important. It's important that we move it forward right now in this session, to provide stability for our industries and the people they employ in our districts, and to ensure that we continue to have a balanced as possible tax structure as we continue to look at those issues.
Thank you. Senate File 84 having been read. Are you ready for the question?
Yes.
Question. Senate File 84 having been read 3 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Chief Clerk, call the roll.
Senate File 84, third reading roll call. Anderson?
Aye.
Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Beitman? Aye. Boner?
Aye.
Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Case? No. Cooper? Aye. Driscoll? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? Aye. Furphy? No. Guru? No. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. James? Aye. Kinski? No. Cole? No. Cost? Aye. Landon? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? No. Pappas? No. Perkins? Aye. Rothfuss? No. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? No. Steinmetz? Aye. Wasserberger? Aye. President Dockstader? Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 84, 21 aye, 8 no, 21 aye, 9 no.
Senate File 84 having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, Senate File 84 has passed the Senate. Senate File 106, reading the bill.
Senate File 106, Wyoming Stable Token Act, sponsored by Senator Rothfuss, an act relating to trade and commerce.
Senate File 106, Senator Scott.
Mr. President, I ask this be pulled off the consent list. I have some real concerns with this bill. As I understand the bill, what it's doing is it's allowing us to issue a form of digital currency called a stable token, which is to be backed by the United States dollar. And that the principal advantage of that is it enables transactions to be conducted much more speedily in the digital world. Mr. President, I have a little concern as to what the consequences of that are going to be, but my principal reason for rising is I think that this violates Article 1, Section 10 of the United States Constitution, which essentially gives the federal government a monopoly on the money supply and what is money and what isn't. And I think that's important. We've got a unified economy. You need one place that is regulating the currency, and that's appropriately the federal government. I don't know who would bring a court test or what the consequences might be, but I do think it violates the U.S. Constitution, Mr. President, and we shouldn't ought to pass such a bill.
Further discussion on Senate File 106, further discussion. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the discussion. It certainly is something that we've talked about, but also designed around. And the intent of the legislation is to make it very, very clear that this isn't a new currency. It is a tokenization of an existing currency, which in this emerging technology field of blockchain is a very standard approach to things. Tokenization basically means that you're taking some asset and you're putting it as a transactional registration on the blockchain so that it's easier to integrate and easier to operate with smart contracts. Again, though, the underlying asset is the US dollar. It would be very possible but certainly a violation of the Constitution for us to truly issue a cryptocurrency. We could create some Wyoming coin, cowboy coin people have always thrown around as a concept. I love the idea, but it's pretty obviously a violation of the Constitution because that's a new currency. This is pointedly, clearly, and was crafted around the concept that it is not a new currency, but it is the United States dollar. And as we do right now with many different electronic transaction systems, it moves around. The good senator from Sweetwater County had an analogy the other day in conversation that I thought was exceptional, which is the idea of a cash credit card where you've got a gift card, where that gift card has specific value to it. It's a means of electronic transaction, which is to some degree equivalent to cash, about the best that we have right now. I think that gift card concept is a good example of how we already do things like this, but that's not nearly as good as what we're looking at here in terms of being able to implement it through blockchain transactions in the cryptocurrency and digital asset space and on smart contracts. So I do appreciate the concern. We carefully thought through that concern, and this is crafted, Mr. President, in such a way as to assuage that concern. Thank you.
Further discussion? Ready for the question? Question have been read 3 separate times. The question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Third reading roll call, Senate File 106. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Beitman? Aye. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? No. Case? Aye. Cooper? Aye. Driscoll? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? Aye. Furphy? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? No. James? No. Kinski? Aye. Cole? Aye. Cost? Aye. Landon? Aye. McEwen? No. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Perkins? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? No. Steinmetz? No. Wasserberger? Aye. President Dockstader? Aye. Closing vote? Closing vote closed. Senate File 106, 24 aye, 6 no.
Senate File 106, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, Senate File 106 has passed the Senate. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, with that order of business, consideration of bills on general file. Do you want to have the privilege of the floor first? Senator Kinski, privilege of the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Folks, join me in welcoming all the way from Johnson County 4-H Club, the Clover Colts. Please stand up, folks, and be recognized.
Clover Colts from up in Johnson County, welcome to the Senate. Senator Driscoll, Majority
Mr. President, I'm going to use privilege or actually and ask. I need to know with finality, we did not finish committee of the whole as according to our schedule. And I need to know if we have to suspend rules to go back into it without adding an extra day or not. And I was unclear when we met this morning where we're at. Not positive.
Let's confer
if it's a guideline or a rule.
Just a moment. Okay, there you have it, Mr. Majority Floor Leader. It's not a rule. The calendar is a suggestion. So if you've been working on a suggestion this whole time, you're okay.
With that, there's only 5 bills there. We are going to stop at 11:30 to go to caucus. So do not filibuster, but whatever's left on the board is left. We're done. So.
Do you want to repeat that so everybody's really clear with what you're doing?
11:30 is a hard time for caucus. So if we're not there, we're done. So those bills are in order. That's all that's coming up. For the rest of it, the rest dies on the floor. So with that, Mr. President, I move the Senate resolve itself into committee of the whole.
Okay, thank you. You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Senator Grew, the Senate is all yours.
Committee of the Whole, please come to order. The first bill for your consideration is Senate File 70. Will the reading clerk please read in the Senate file?
Senate File 70, Revisers Bill, sponsored by the Management Council, an act related to the revision of statutes and other legislative enactments. It was referred to Committee Number 12, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes Senators Dockstader, Driscoll, Grew, Hicks, and Rothfuss. Senator Dockstader, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure? Who wants to stand and make the motion? Senator Grew, you want to make the motion? Senator Grew.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move at this time Senate File 70, the Revisers Bill, and ask for your favorable consideration. And there is a Committee of the Whole amendment. Can I ask for it to be read in at this time?
Senate File 70, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 1, line 15 after.
Back to you, Senator Grew.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the Standing Committee Amendment, and that is line 1, page 1, line 15, and page 10, line 2, and ask for your favorable consideration.
All right. Tell us about the Standing Committee Amendment or the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll go through this real quick. These are just technical corrections that have been found by LSO staff on all of our work in the previous session. And I'll go through them each one, not talk about them because in the interest of time. But these are just minor corrections and just one word here, one spelling there, and that's all they are all the way through. And I would ask for your favorable consideration first of the Standing Committee Amendment, and then I'll go through the rest and stand for any questions.
All right, we're on the Standing Committee Amendment. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Senator Grew's motion that the Committee of the Whole adopt Senate File 70 Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 has been adopted. Back on the Revisers Bill, Senator Grew.
Okay, get your stopwatches out. Here we go. This is the Revisers Bill, page 2, line 10 and line 20, page 3, line 13, page 3, line 21, page 4, line 8, line 14, which is my favorite, page 5, line 5, line 20, page 6, line 1, page 7, line 7 and 8, and 12 and 13 and 21, page 8, line 10 and line 23, page 9, line 12, page 10, line 2 and line 20, page 10, line 10, page 11, line 13. That is the Revisers Bill. Stand for questions.
That is the Revisers Bill. Any discussion, any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of Senator Grew's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with a due pass recommendation on Senate File 70, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The Revisers Bill has passed the Committee of the Whole.
Can't say we're not trying here, folks. Next. Oh, let's slow this one way down. Let's take a break, everybody. No. Next bill for your consideration, Senate File 83. Would the reading clerk please read in the bill? Senate File, sorry.
Senate File 83, Prohibiting Chemical Abortions, an act relating to abortions, sponsored by Senator Salazar. It was referred to Committee Number 10, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes Senators Baldwin, Bouchard, Furphy, Hutchings, and McEwen. Senator Baldwin, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure? Senator Baldwin. Whoop, sorry. Mike. Where are you? There you are.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with a favorable recommendation on Senate File 83. For explanation of this Senate file, I turn to Senator Salazar.
Senator Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, members of the Senate, I will make this brief since many of you have come up to me. I think this is one of the few bills where everyone knows where they stand. This passed with 25 votes on the introduction. I'm not asking you to, I'm not going to try and change your minds. I bring this bill forward because I believe abortion is the taking of human life. Pro-Life Wyoming has asked me to bring this bill this year. This bill prohibits 5 drugs for the sole purpose of committing an abortion. These drug restrictions do not apply to the life of the mother, contraceptions, miscarriage. I ask for your support.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Scott. Mr. Chairman, this bill is a major bill, does prohibit abortions. There are issues of morality, issues of religion, constitutional issues that all need to be explored with this bill. I do say I resent the time constraint that's been placed on this in committee of the whole, but I think we can deal with it successfully on second reading with an extended debate there. So I will hold my remarks until second reading.
Senator Case. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I always wonder how we can be so certain in our world. And I know faith is a powerful thing, and from there you can derive direction. I'm a faithful man. I look at this kind of differently. I look at what a message we're sending to women, Mr. Chairman, and that we're telling women what to do with their own bodies, and we're in essence restricting freedoms that women enjoy now. And through history, the relationship between men and women has had one downside, I think, that women very often have been overly controlled or restricted by their actions by men, either through laws or through religious norms, Women can be controlled through bills like this, Mr. Chairman. They can be controlled through these policies. Women don't always choose how they land because of the overbearance of men and others in their life. I think about this a lot in terms of this bill. Mr. Chairman, I don't exactly have the right answer, but you're in essence telling people what medicines they can take. Some of these have different uses, and you're really getting into a realm where you're going to insert yourself in between the doctor and the patient relationship. And I do not want to be there. I think we should vote this bill down, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Further comments? Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that we're in a hurry, but I think that, as the sponsor noted, this is an important issue, and it's certainly worth discussing. And I don't think it's appropriate for me to stand here and convince anyone in here how they should believe regarding this issue. That's not my job as a legislator. To change your view on abortion, whether it's chemical or any other type. These are personal choices. Mr. Chairman, what I don't think is a personal choice is when it's the legislature that's making the choice, right? That's very different from the idea of a personal choice. That is deciding on behalf of a diverse population how they should believe on a challenging and important issue. It's picking a truth when we know that reasonable people, our friends, our family members, will disagree on this. We disagree on this. We have diversity of views in this room here. But to say that the Wyoming legislature is going to take away an existing right to choose on behalf of all of the women of the state of Wyoming, whether they agree with our decision or not, is contrary to the freedom that we hold dear so often in nearly every other situation, Mr. Chairman. Why is it appropriate here to be big government? Why is it appropriate here to make the decision on behalf of others, to take away freedom that is already held dear? Mr. Chairman, it's not. It's not an appropriate act of this legislature. We know that right now, it's probably currently unconstitutional based on decisions of the U.S. Supreme Court. So we know that this is contrary to case law, to Roe versus Wade. We know that it's in courts right now and that that may change. But what we're doing here with this this Senate file would be passing a law that is known to be unconstitutional and is known to restrict the rights, freedoms, and liberties of right around half of the state of Wyoming in a way that is contentious, disconcerting, causes a great deal of turmoil. And we do know the personal nature, the deeply personal nature of this issue. And I certainly respect my good colleague and friend that brought this legislation and his deeply held views. But what I'm asking is to respect the different views of others. I don't challenge his or anyone's views. Keep them, hold them dear. Do what you believe is right in your heart. But when that conflicts with someone else's deeply held views, that's when we've got some challenges and we have to carefully and thoughtfully weigh, is it appropriate for us to step in and make that decision on behalf of everybody? On this bill, Mr. Chairman, I believe the answer is no.
Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate our urgency in wanting to move on to the 11:30 hour, but it is our job to take serious matters under consideration and have this discussion, and that's what we do on Committee of the Whole. We talk a lot about the legislature meeting for a limited number of days by design. Not everything that we all bring will get heard. Some of our bills will die. That is the nature of why we're here. So I feel like this is an important conversation. I think my biggest concern and my question for the bringer of the bill is, was there any, in committee, was there any discussion about perhaps unintended consequences of what this might have? As I look at what these pills do, a number of them are most effective within 48 hours of a woman becoming pregnant. So if you ban these, then a woman's left with the option of having to figure out another way, if that's what she wants to do, to terminate her pregnancy. I think, living so close to a neighboring state that's only 10 miles away technically, what I often hear from constituents is that when they face this situation, they just head south. So I don't know if the unintended consequence of this will be an increased number of women getting abortions. And so I was just wondering if there was that discussion in committee and what the bringer of this bill thinks about perhaps some of those outcomes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other comments or questions before we return to the speaker, or the bringer? Senator Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. What's at issue here is a policy of our particular state. I don't know what other states are going to do. I can roll down the list and tell you that South Dakota, the House of Representatives, just passed this bill. I can tell you that Arizona, Alabama is dealing with this, almost this exact bill. But at the end of the day, and I appreciate the minority leaders who I respect. I appreciate and respect the views of the people on the other side of this issue. But at the end of the day, for me, for the pro-life movement, it has to do with saving a human being. And again, I say, I am not here to try and change your opinion. Take a vote. These are fundamental beliefs. I'm not going to change your view. I bring it forward again, as I say, because the pro-life community in Wyoming wants this bill heard and voted on this year. And with that, Mr. Chairman, do as you will.
Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Speaking to the comments that I've heard on this topic and others like it, that I'm disappointed by the Senate chamber when I hear, you've made your minds up, there's no point in discussing. That is abrogating your duty, actually. This is a body of the free marketplace of ideas, where we share thoughts and we try to convince each other of the superiority of them through debate, which is why we have debate. So I agree, this is a tough topic, and a lot of people have made their minds up. But refusing to discuss it and share with our ideas with each other as to why you're for or against it is contrary to the purpose of the Senate, is contrary to the purpose of public debate, is contrary to the purpose of political discourse. Do not shy away from disagreement. Do not shy away from conflict or different ideas. This is what we are here to do. And we must have these hard conversations with each other and with our constituents so they know why we vote a certain way, so they know what we are concerned with. So please refrain from the desire to engage in difficult discourse. This is what we have been elected to do.
Thank you, Senator. Further discussion? Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Baldwin's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report it, do so with a recommendation that Senate File 83 do pass, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. The ayes have it. Senate File 83 has passed Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 51. Reading clerk, please read in the bill.
Senate File 51, Fairness in Women's Sports Act, sponsored by Senator Schuler, an act relating to school sports. It was referred to Committee Number 4, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Beitman, Salazar, and Scott. No, Senators Ellis and Rothfuss. Senator Scott, Chairman.
Before I go to Senator Scott, I want to just make this really clear. This is Committee of the Whole. We will hear from everyone. I understand the Majority Floor Leader's request and his desires, but we are going to hear everyone. That is what this is for, and I know we all know that. So please don't feel shy about, speaking up on this. We will hear everyone on every one of these bills that we can. So with that, Senator Scott.
Mr. President, I move that when the Committee of the Whole rise to report, do so the recommendation that Senate File 51 do pass. Mr. Chairman, the plan on this is I'm going to ask the sponsor to explain the bill, then we'll come back and read in the Standing Committee amendment and deal with that, and then go to questions. So, Mr. Chairman, with that, I yield to Senator Schuler for an explanation of the Senate file.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Senator Schuler, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate File 51 is really all about fairness in women's sports. The catch title, if you take a look at the bill, it's really all this legislation is about, it's just fairness. And if you take a look at the definition of fairness, it just means impartial and just treatment. That's really what this bill is focusing on, pure and simple, fairness in athletic competition. I'll try to make this fairly brief, but, you know, I think most of us understand that there's an issue right now with an increase in transgender athletes that are competing against biological women. And we're seeing some of those hard-earned equal rights that we got 50 years ago with Title IX kind of under attack. Just to go back and just tell you quickly, Title IX states that the athletic interests and abilities of males and females must be equally and effectively accommodated. Even at the college level, they must provide opportunity for competition which equally reflects the competitive abilities of male and females. We are always saying, let's take a look at the science. Well, the science tells us that males they have physiological advantages in athletic competition. They're taller, they're bigger, they're larger, their bones are different, bone density is different, hearts and lungs are different. Their speed and agility just gives them a lot more advantages over women. And that's the reason we have women's sports. That's the reason we're not forced to compete against men. And the science also, they've done a lot of studies recently that shows that even if you suppress the testosterone in a male, it does not substantially eliminate those advantages. They still have about a 10 to 50% advantage depending on the sport. So if you take a look at the high school activities policy, which I looked at, it opens the door to unfair competition, as a male could identify as a female at any time and compete in any female sport with the individual school making the decision. A high school boy could compete in the indoor track season as a male and then identify as a female and run against the girls in the outdoor season. And there are some court decisions right now with that same outcome in another state, and some girls were left off the podium as a result. And basically, it would be a no-win situation for that committee and for the biological females who probably would end up on the bench. Now, there are some causes of action, which I'm not going to go into those. You can take a look at those because of the standing committee amendment. We'll deal with those a little bit. But the bottom line is that for competition to remain fair and safe, we've got to ensure that only biological females are competing against females. We can't ignore the science and the biology, and if we don't, then we put them in situations that are physically not safe for them. Every transgender athlete or male athlete who identifies as a female, they destroy fair competition for biological females. They displace females from playing time, recognition, scholarship opportunities, and potentially some of those same females may drop out of sports altogether. So the federal courts have recognized that it is constitutional to provide separate programs and opportunities based on biological sex. We are not going to lose Title IX funding. But this legislation just simply states on page 3 that if you're a male at birth based on your official birth certificate, then you compete athletically as a male. 10 states have already passed this legislation. There's another 20-some that are working on it. So this bill, again, is just not meant for anything other than fairness. There's plenty of opportunities for transgender athletes to compete on mixed sex or co-ed teams where biology is not a factor. The federal courts have affirmed this, and that should bolster anybody that's concerned about Title IX funding. So again, this legislation is just a way to honor those people that worked hard to get Title IX, and for 50 years we've had the opportunity to compete as females, and I just would hope that we continue that fight for the many biological female athletes in our great state who also deserve that opportunity to compete fairly with impartial and just treatment. And at this time, I would call on Senator Scott to read in the amendment.
Senator Scott. Mr. Chairman, I ask the standing committee amendment be read in.
Senate File 51, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 1, line 3, after.
Senator Scott. Mr. Chairman, move adoption of the standing committee amendment. Mr. Chairman, what the standing committee amendment does is a couple things. It takes out the causes of action section in here. The committee felt that without having to pass anything further, there were adequate standing and cause of action, you can get an injunction. So we felt that was unnecessary. It puts in a specialized appeal process and has asked that on the appeal board sit somebody who's had coaching experience and somebody who knows about human physiology and what the real differences between men and women are that are relevant here. There are some very rare cases where you can get in trouble where there's some uncertainty. You need an appeal process, and it provides for confidentiality. And then it switches. In one place, we had the State Board of Education. We've gone to the State Department of Education through the superintendent, because the State Department deals with this and the State Board does not. So that's what the Standing Committee amendment does, Mr. Chairman. I urge its adoption.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Any comments on the amendment? On the amendment, Senator Wasserberger.
Well, on and against the amendment, thank you, Mr. Chairman, on and against the amendment. And the real reason is because we already have this in place with the WHSAA, and that's an independent commission. They make that decision, and I would urge that we leave it there. It allows for local control and local districts to be a part of that. We're now making it into a state decision. And so on and against the amendment, but a question for the sponsor. The U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights issued a notice of interpretation explaining that it will enforce Title IX's prohibition. So my question is, how will that impact this bill? But that's for after we deal with the standing committee amendment.
We'll hold the question and go to Senator Scott. Mr. Chairman, there is an existing procedure through the athletic board that essentially defers the decision to local districts. And Mr. Chairman, that doesn't work because the consequence of that is that local districts can, and some of them will, make decisions that allow men to compete on the women's teams. And that's unfair competition. You need a single source of a statewide rule. That's what the standing committee amendment does.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Senator Rothfuss? And then to Senator Lamb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask that the amendment be divided, and the intent of the division is there's basically two actions in the standing committee amendment. One of those actions is to remove the penalty side, the civil actions, and the other is this appeals board concept through the state superintendent of public instruction. And I believe, and I'll check with the good chairman, but that Division 1 would be lines 1 through 9 and lines 11 through the balance of the amendment, and that would be the portion that deals with these civil actions and remedies, and Division 2 would be lines 10 on page 1 through page 2, line 10. And it looks like Senator Ellis may disagree with me on that.
And point of order along those lines, Mr. Chairman, I think on page 2, lines 17 through 19, talk about some duties that we're changing that would have been assigned to the Department of Education being reassigned to the state superintendent. So I don't know if the bringer of the division would like lines 17 and 19 to stay with both, be their own standalone, but that's a third concept that's also included in this amendment that probably should be addressed in some separate fashion.
That do not have that standing committee amendment. And I was wondering, before we actually vote on the divisions,
Okay.
so,
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, before we divide it and vote on the amendments, it'd be nice to know if we had the amendment, so.
Oh, and equally nice of me to understand all the divisions. So while I try to understand it, we'll pass them out for everyone else to try to understand them. How
All
about
right.
that? We'll make sure they get printed up. So we'll stand at ease till the sound of the gavel. Is that okay? I'm sorry. Well, they don't have, so we're getting them copied. So then now, what I need some help on figuring out this division. So what is he? I got it right. I got it. Oh shoot! I'm playing with the wrong one. Ooh. Shoot! I'm sorry. I'm playing with the one that was in here. not the one that's over here, sorry. I shouldn't do that. I'm sorry. I know. I'm sorry. Here, I'll erase. Okay, now wait a minute. Let me. Okay, wait a minute. Division 1 is 1 through 9. So just leaves line 10. That's it. So 11 through 42, or into the page. Into the page. So this is 1. Everything but line 10. Oh, sorry. Senate will come to order. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Let me, if I can, would you like me to give this? Let me give this a try, make sure I have it, and then see how we did. Okay, so we're dividing the amendment, and what I have is on page 1, Division 1 is lines 1 through 9, lines 11 through the balance of the page on page 1, and then on page 2, lines 11 through 18. That is Division 1. Okay. Senator Rothfuss.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'll interrupt you because that wasn't my intent, and my apologies. I think it'll be easier now that everyone's looking at it.
Okay.
Division 1 would be lines 1 through 9 on page 1. And then on page 2, lines 11 through 19. Hey, Division 2 would be the balance of the amendment, which is page 1, lines 10 through the end of the page, and page 2, lines 1 through 10, which is different. And Mr. Chairman, if I may address Senator Ellis's question.
Just
Yep.
one moment, please. Let me just read it one more time for the body, make sure we have it right. Division 1, page 1, lines 1 through 9, and page 2, lines 11 through 19. Division 2, lines on page 1, lines 10 through the balance of the page, and page 2, lines 1 through 10, correct?
Correct.
Okay, now, back to you on the question from Senator Ellis. Whoop, Ms. Senator Landon, point of order.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a question. I'm probably reading this wrong, but it feels like if Division 1 is defeated, can Division 2 stand? That's the only question I have about this division of the amendment. So it feels like if you eliminate the one, then it automatically should eliminate the other, but.
Thank you, Senator Landon. One moment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the second division can stand alone. There's no language being deleted that it replaces elsewhere. It is a standalone concept of creating a statewide appeal process, and it doesn't depend on any of the other language in Division 1. And I would also, if I may at this time, address Senator Ellis's question on 17 through 19, page 2, discussing the Board of Education and insert Superintendent of Public Instruction. That's who puts the rules forward effectively for this process. And it's fine whether Division 2 stands or not. Now, it is a separate question. It could be a third division without any problem because it stands alone, but I just incorporated it into one, honestly, because I was going to support Division 1. And but it would totally be in order and reasonable to divide it out as well, as Senator Ellis was asking.
Senator Ellis.
Mr. Chairman, I think we can leave them together, but I did want to just note that that's an important change. If you look at page 5, it is who drafts the rules. Our State Board of Education, they write content and performance standards for the basket of goods. It doesn't, to me, make sense for them to have this authority. So if you feel very strongly about pulling this out separately, but I just wanted to make it known that that's an important feature of this particular part of the amendment.
Thank you, Senator Ellis. The chair rules that this division is appropriate. Acceptable, appropriate. Not likable. Yes, Senator Rothfuss.
On Division 1, vote aye.
Okay. Let's see, you call for the question. You've heard the motion on Standing Committee Amendment number 1, Division 1. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Ayes have it. We're on Division 2. Division 2 of Standing Committee Amendment number 1. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this will get into some of the debate and concerns that I have with the bill overall, but the concern that I have with this is it's set up institutionally gender biased. And that's a real concern. When you read the language itself on page 1, looking at page 22, the sentence there, if the appeals board finds that a student does not possess in a sufficient quantity the normal male physical capabilities, I don't know how that would be judged all by itself, but let's go on. To present a threat of unfair competition to, and here's the gender biased discrimination clearly, to a normal female, which clearly implies that we're now talking about as opposed to abnormal individuals. And again, even if the process conceptually were a process that I would support, where I feel like it's a bit of a creepy process to have a statewide board of people making decisions regarding the gender identity of individuals, appointing that board might go a step too far. But even if that were a good thing, I think we should at least have appropriate non-discriminatory language underlying such an amendment, which we don't have here. So on and against Division 2. Thank you.
Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On against Division 2, I believe it creates ambiguity in this bill where there was none before. For different reasons than my fellow senator, just on and against this, I think it makes a loophole in the bill, and we should defeat this amendment. If we want to come back with something better on second reading, then we could do that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I think we need an appeal process in this. And one of the reasons is there are some very rare abnormalities that can cause concern. Most of them are dealt with by the bill by going with the original birth certificate. That deals with most of them, but you still have the possibility of getting a dispute that involves individuals. You need an appeal process. It does need to specify the gender of the students involved the way it does, because that's what we're seeking to do here. We're seeking to keep the men out of the women's sports. And the appeal process here does that. And it does provide for confidentiality and does get you a uniform state rule. I think those are all important. Now, if the body sees we can come back and try again on second reading, that would be perfectly all right. But we do need an appeal process, I do think. Mr. Chairman, and this, I urge us to leave this until somebody comes up with a better one.
Further comments on Division number 2? Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, this was brought on with the Standing Committee, and I looked at it pretty closely. We actually do have to have some type of cause of action, and actually I liked what we had in the bill better, but this brings maybe one thing to think about that might be a little bit more neutral. It kind of takes the lawyers out of the deal, and that's not a bad thing necessarily, but I think this could be tweaked if we pass it to make it still have some teeth in it and still be good. So I said I felt like it could be a friendly amendment, but I think it will probably need some tweaking on a second reading if it does pass. Thank you.
Further comment on Division 2 of the amendment. Division 2 of the amendment. Sensing you're ready to vote, you've heard the motion on Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to Senate File 51, Division 2. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Division 2 fails. We're back on the bill. Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, I think what we did and what stayed in, because we did pass the first division of the proposed amendment, I believe that we have taken this issue and taken it out of the arena where it normally would reside, and we've created something else for the state superintendent to do. I have the same misgivings about that as my friend from Campbell County. I have worked for years and years and years with our High School Activities Association, and the professionals who serve in that capacity are unmatched. They're really held up across the country for the work that they've done and do every day. I'd like a little more discussion about why we did that to this bill. It just feels like to me they are better suited to take care of this. They've been handling it for the last 8 years, and why are we pushing this over into places where they really don't deal with this? So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Landon. Senator Wasserberger.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question for the sponsor. The U.S. Department, and I'm in support of this bill. And I just need some questions answered. The U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights issued a notice of interpretation explaining that it will enforce Title IX's prohibition on discrimination on the basis of sex. 1, discrimination based on sexual orientation, and 2, discrimination based on gender identity. This was based on the Supreme Court's decision in Bostock versus Clayton County 2020. How will this bill impact that decision? And let me tell you, I may be the only person in this room that's had a civil rights investigation into his junior high. And they came in and they investigated, they looked at my budget, they looked at the number of games between girls and boys, and at about 2 years after that, I finally was cleared because everything was the exact equal. So we need to be very, very, very careful on what we do here. And if you have one of those civil rights violations or investigations, you don't work with them, you work for them. And so I just asked the sponsor, are we gonna be all right with this if we do it?
Senator Wasserberg. Senator Scott. Mr. Chairman, with regard to question about the High School Athletic Association, the testimony we had in committee was that their system was to defer the decision to the local school districts to deal with it. And that is not appropriate. You need a uniform state rule, and if you don't have it, what you will see is a few districts will allow some people that allege to be transgender that in fact present the physical characteristics that those of us that are men have. And there is a difference. Believe me, there is a difference. And the resulting competition will be unfair across the state. So we cannot rely on that. We need to set a uniform rule, and that's what this bill does.
Senator French.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of this. You know, we've all been kind of thinking about this over the last year or two. You know, this is important. I'll just relate my own situation. I've got a couple young, beautiful granddaughters, 11 and 13. And I want them to have a level playing field. They enjoy sports, they love sports. The youngest one is great at soccer. And, you know, when they're young, they play in a one-set soccer club, right? And she just got so disheartened because the boys, once they get to a certain age, they play pretty rough. And they just beat the tar out of her, you know? So like this bill says, it's fairness. I want our young girls and our young women to have a fair chance in sports. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator French. Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to explain a little bit of my concern with this bill. We've heard some testimony that this is constitutional, and I think that the constitutional conversation has occurred more in terms of how Title IX came to be. But the one, I wanted to point out to one instance to a state immediately to our west where this exact language was adopted 2 years ago. It went to a federal district court, and the federal district court looked at it And they analyzed it looking at the 14th Amendment of your Constitution, which says that no state shall deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the law. When I initially skimmed this bill, and reading on page 3, lines 1 through 3, that's the meat of the bill. You would clearly have some form of gender or discrimination based on gender. So we discriminate in the law on occasion when we talk about tax brackets. As long as a state can justify its reason for having maybe different taxation rates for its citizens on things like income tax, courts generally don't have a problem with that because your tax status isn't a protected class. Imagine, if you will, on page 3, lines 1 through 3, that the language was worded a little differently. What if it said athletic teams or sports designated for white athletes only should not be open to other students who are non-white? If you had such language, the court would apply a much higher level of scrutiny if you have any kind of law that discriminates on the basis of race. So here we have something different, something based on gender. Courts still apply a higher level of scrutiny when you have this kind of language. So what happened in Idaho, they said, and I think these words are important, the court recognizes that this decision is likely to be controversial. While the citizens of the state are likely to either vehemently oppose or fervently support the act, the Constitution must always prevail. It's the court's role as the third branch of government to interpret the law. And at this juncture, that means looking at the act and determining whether it violated the Constitution. And they said it did. So I've thought about how do we tweak this to provide for that fairness we're all seeking. I think one of the arguments we're going to hear consistently is about safety. And I get it. I was a female athlete in high school. I've got 2 girls that play sports. There is a safety concern for certain sports. But if we're going to do it for one gender, we need to do it for all. That means we can't just say, this only applies for trans women. Then it applies across the board. Then we can't allow girls who have maybe practiced to become kickers in football, for example, who want to play football, to participate in those sports. Or, think of other instances. I've heard a lot of examples about girls wanting to wrestle. And so, Mr. Chairman, I just want to offer to the body, this is not an easy, simple thing to do. If you want something that's going to withstand court scrutiny, we need a lot more thought to thread the needle. So, we could pass this, and I suspect that the body will, but maybe it doesn't, I don't know. But if we end up giving the court something they're going to dismiss, what have we accomplished here? So I would just ask to give this more thought. I don't think we threaded the needle on this one. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Ellis. Senator Case, let's go over to this side. Senator Case, and then we'll go Nethercutt Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm thinking we're in an area that we're not really very good at, and that this is kind of an area that really doesn't belong to us in the bigger picture, I think. Because this is really complicated. People's gender association, it's not really black and white. I know you think it is. I know that a lot of you think it is. But there are so many good people that just go through agony about being, perhaps I could say, misaligned or something in their minds. You can't judge that because you don't feel that. But this bill feels really mean, along with other bills that we've passed. It's a bill to keep people out, people that have probably gone through a journey that you wouldn't even believe because they had to go through that journey. It's also a very discriminatory bill. I think it violates Article 7, Section 10, the Wyoming Constitution, that says no discrimination between pupils. In none of the public schools so established and maintained shall distinction or discrimination be made on account of sex, race, or color. The federal courts have ruled in this area. Mr. Chairman, it's as blatant as pre-Title IX days, where you discriminated between men and women's sports. It rises to that level in the minds of federal courts now. We're not going to get anywhere with this. We have been dealing with it apparently very well for 8 years, is my understanding. I'm not even aware where there's been an issue. Maybe there have been. But we're kind of, and I think a sports record is something to be very proud of, Mr. Chairman. but it ain't life or death, okay? We're gonna get through all this. Good female athletes will rise and be magnificent achievers because of the strength of their character, their performance. And maybe there was that one time where they got beat by this other person, but that was another person that came through the most incredible journey in their world, and they struggled. And you have to have empathy for that. Who would go through that? Let's not be mean. Let's not pass this bill. Let's try to be more inclusive in Wyoming. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Case. Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, what we're dealing here is bluntly with a clash of rights. You can, and unfortunately, I think we're dealing with it here in a zero-sum situation. If you allow people who are men, were men, exhibit the physical characteristics of men to participate in women's sports, that is unfair. And you are denying the girls and the women who wish to participate in sports the opportunity to do so under circumstances that are fair. And we all know what the differences are. It's inherent in the way our species is. We may not like that, but that's the way we are. The other argument is that you're denying the people who have changed from being identified as male to those identified as female, but those people have the physical characteristics of men. So you either are unfair to all the women that want to participate in sports, or you're not. And you can talk all about it, but I have a great deal of confidence in our court system that as the cases elsewhere on similar bills rise to the appropriate level in the appeals process, that common sense will prevail. And they'll see the unfairness that letting people who are essentially men compete as women creates. And I appeal to the Senate, use a little common sense and pass this bill.
Senator Nethercutt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a female who was not an athlete and instead got cut from all of the teams, I appreciate the Senate's preoccupation with fairness. Where were you all when I was 12? So always starting off with a little bit of humor, I hope the Senate can appreciate that. It's a tough issue that society is grappling with. It's one that makes us uncomfortable. It's one that we don't understand how to approach. It's one where we don't want to be mean, but want to be fair. So fortunately, we don't have to make those decisions, but rather what we do know based on the case law already decided on similar bills, and your plain language reading of the bill, this isn't a moral question. It really is a legal one. And I urge you not to abrogate your duty or violate your oaths by making unconstitutional laws, even if you love the idea, even if you feel so compelled to protect girls in sports, you would make it unconstitutional law? It clearly is. And I'm sorry that that's the answer, but it is. As a lawyer, I give this information a lot. It's unconstitutional. It will be declared unconstitutional on its face. And so, as we've had happen in this body before, a great deal of attorney fees are paid to the prevailing party when our laws are determined to be unconstitutional. And do you know who pays that price? The taxpayers pay the price. Your minerals pay that price, which then comes out of the schools. The last time it happened was just a few years ago. The taxpayers paid over $600,000 in attorney fees to some 17th Street lawyers down to the state to the south because we were emotional over an issue. Landowner rights. How could we be wrong? Well, we were, and we paid. Well, the taxpayers paid. So again, I urge great caution, and do not let emotions get in the way of the unconstitutionality of this issue. We can't ignore it because we're so compelled by the concern. We as a society will continue to balance these interests and understand how to raise our families and to raise our children in this state by relying on those teachers, coaches, professionals, and school boards to navigate these issues as we know they always have. So let's trust them to deal with these children, which is what they are, in a way that they know how to do, and as we've delegated those professionals to handle.
Senator Nethercutt. Senator Hutchings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to be real quick. On and for the bill, I see this as one of the occasions where we've taken down the stop signs and we're dealing with the consequence of that. I do not see this bill in any way as being mean. There are 3 women in a state to the west of us who worked hard to be on their track team, and a biological male is now running on that track team, running circles around them. This is not mean. It's about fairness, and truth will win. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Hutchings. Senator Schuler, bring us up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for all the good conversation. I'll try to bring this home. First of all, if Senate File 51 prohibited females from playing on males' teams, it would violate Title IX, but this bill doesn't. It was written to fully comply with Title IX's requirements that girls be allowed to try out for boys' teams. In fact, there was a gal a couple years ago who went out for the Vanderbilt University team and became a kicker, and great, good for her. But Senate File 51 is consistent with the U.S. Constitution and federal law. Federal courts have long recognized it as constitutional under the Equal Protection Clause to provide separate programs and opportunities that are based on biological sex, whether it's a sports team or whether it's locker rooms or even single-sex schools, as long as the separate programs are substantially related to accomplishing an important government interest. So, and the courts have upheld those policies. So I don't think we need to worry about that. If you take a look at Clark versus Arizona, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld that policy and said that males are not eligible to compete on female teams. The challenge policy just simply recognized that the physiological fact that the males would have an undue advantage competing against women for positions, that there was clearly a substantial relationship between the goal of redressing past discrimination and providing equal opportunities for women. The only law right now, the only state that has had an issue that's been struck down, it hasn't really been struck down, but it's temporarily enjoined, was a state to the west, and it has been appealed. It was appealed to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and on appeal, they sent it back to the Idaho District Court to determine whether that case should be dismissed as moot. And so if that happens, then that state would be no longer enjoined. So 10 states have passed it already. They seem to find this is the same bill, basically, that they find legal. And honestly, no school has ever lost funding in the 50 years since Title IX was enacted. Federal law does require due process, and you have to have a hearing before a judge can state why its actions do not violate Title IX and why they shouldn't lose funding, but it just hasn't happened. It's a remote possibility. So this, in black and white, this Senate File 51 should meet all the muster that we need to in the courts. And lastly, just heard an interview on TV, because again, this is happening all over our country. And there was a really great interview with a long-distance swimmer who has swum. She's got some records for the English Channel. I think she's even broken some records from Miami to Cuba. Amazing swimmer. And she just, basically, she just stood up and said, here's the deal. If we don't take care of this issue, we will wake up one day and we will have men's sports, we'll have transgender sports, and we will no longer have women's sports because they will cease to exist. So I just ask you to vote for this. Appreciate your conversation.
question being called. Oh, sorry, Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we've heard good concerns, we've had good debate, but I think there's a couple of important things that really haven't risen through the discussion. The first is what we're doing right now. There's been some tangential discussion about the fact that the Wyoming High School Activities Association already has a policy in place and that it's had it for 8 years. But there's some implication here that somehow that's been failing and that there have been circumstances in the state of Wyoming where that policy, which has been in place for 8 years, has failed to achieve the objectives of the state. That is not the case. In fact, the policy of the Wyoming High School Activities Association is recognized as the gold standard around the country. Other states are looking to it because it does provide things like local control, individual circumstances being contemplated, discussion, some negotiation, just trying to figure out a way to be fair to everyone. This legislation is fair to one side of the discussion. It's trying to basically put the thumb on the scale for women in sports under the assumption that all transgender athletes are somehow going to have an innate ability that puts them at an advantage, and as if they're gaming the system. It is providing a contemplation and an assumption of motivation that is nefarious. Like there's a whole transgender community out around the state that is just doing this so that they can break records. That's why they're making their life choices and identifying as they do. And that's absurd. We haven't seen it. In fact, the only examples that have been used have been out-of-state examples. And there are some interesting ones around the country for college athletics. There is a state to the west of us that had some circumstances, but the state to the west of us first called our state and said, hey, how have you been handling it? It sounds like you're doing it well. We don't have a problem. And that's the first thing I hope everyone would ask yourself. Is there a problem that we're solving? Not just concerns and considerations over a cup of coffee where everyone's shouting about things that might annoy them in the future. And all of these narratives that haven't happened but could someday. Is there a problem now, Mr. Chairman? No, there is not a problem now. If there is a problem, do we need a law to fix it? You know, we see everything as if we've got a hammer and everything's a nail because we're the legislature, but it doesn't always mean that this body deciding a one-size-fits-all solution for every district in the state is appropriate. It may come as a surprise, but my district doesn't want this bill. My district has a different view of things than other districts, and that's fine. I do understand, Mr. Chairman, that we probably need a way to bring these districts together, recognizing that athletics teams in my district will be competing against others. We need a fair system for that. That's literally why the Wyoming High School Activities Association exists, to bring together districts, to work with local school boards. We don't always need a law, particularly when things aren't broken. And if we did need a law, if we get to the point where you've answered yes for the first two, does this fix it? No, because it's patently unconstitutional. The idea that this will withstand constitutional scrutiny is inaccurate. The idea that the state to the west of us is going to see it dismissed as moot and therefore it's constitutional is a circumstance based on the standing of the individuals that brought the complaint, where the court may determine it's moot because the students have left school. Not because of the fact basis of the law, but simply because the court may dismiss since there are no complainants with standing. I wouldn't want to hang my hat on that to determine constitutionality. This body knows that when something's enjoined, that means that upon a first look at the evidence, there's a high probability of success without hearing the case. It appears this one's a slam dunk and a potential costly slam dunk. Do we need to pay $600,000 to $1 million to lose another court case as a state so that we can try to solve a problem that doesn't even exist? Mr. Chairman, I don't think we do. But moreover, from my vantage point, I share the concerns of the good senator from Lander. This is sending a statement to our transgender community that I don't want any part of sending. This is not a kind bill. It's not just about fairness. When you're looking at it from the perspective of the athletes that I think are intended to be represented here, sure, it's about fairness, but that's not how the transgender community of our state takes it, Mr. Chairman. If we want to be the equality state, we have to be the equality state for everybody, not just the classes that we want to support today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and against.
Thanks, Senator Rothfuss. Anyone else to speak? Question? Question having been called. All those in favor of Senator Scott's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that Senate File 51 do pass, say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Division having been called. All those in favor, please rise. All those opposed? Ayes have it. The Senate File 51 is passed committee of the whole. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Committee of the whole rise and report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor, say aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Mr. President.
We learned our first lesson on bills not on the vine.
Reading the committee report.
Mr. President, your committee of the whole, having had under considerations bills on general file, begs leave to report as follows. Senate File 70, do pass amended. Senate File 83, do pass. Senate File 51, do pass amended. Senator Carew, Chairman.
Senator Carew.
I move the adoption of the committee of the whole report.
For the motion, go ahead, Senator Scott.
On the committee of the whole, can we have the actual vote announced from the last bill?
Yes.
I think we did, but for the record, I
I'm
think
sorry.
you did. Go ahead. I heard you say it. But
Mr.
go
President,
ahead.
yes, it's 21-8, I believe.
Yeah, I recall, but okay. Thank you. All right, let's try that again, Senator Carew.
I'm sorry. Oh, move the adoption of the committee of the whole report, Mr. President.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Announcements. Announcements. Senator Anderson.
Mr. President, your Minerals Committee will meet today upon noon recess, whenever that is, in Capitol Extension Room 4 and online to hear House Bill 9, Economic Development Program, Tribal Inclusion, and House Bill 70, Digital Identity Protection, and if time allows, House Bill 47, Engrossed Local Impact Assistance Payments. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lander, and then Senator Bonner. Oh, what? Hold on.
Affect the reports, Mr. President.
Hang on.
Mike.
Go ahead.
We will go into caucus immediately on noon recess, so the committee meetings will have to be held right after caucus.
Right after caucus.
Yeah.
Okay,
So-
so got a motion on the floor, but yeah, okay, right after. Okay, go ahead. Senator Landon.
Mr. President, your Transportation Committee will meet upon adjournment tonight in W2 downstairs to take up House Bill 7 engrossed commercial vehicle driving disqualification and House Bill 16 military assistance trust fund authorized uses. House Bill 17 is listed, will likely not be heard, but that will be up to the committee. That's veterans facilities surrounded by grazing if time permits, and that's upon adjournment tonight, Mr. President.
Lucky one with the night committee. Senator Bonner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee number 5, Agriculture, will meet tomorrow, March 1st, upon adjournment in Capitol Extension Room W2 and online to consider House Bill 3 engrossed state land leases, House Bill 4 engrossed water permits, livestock on federal land, House Bill 5 wild horse and burrow management if introduced and referred, and House Bill 2 engrossed disposition of water rights if time permits.
Thank you. Further announcement, Senator Case.
Thank you very much. Your committee number 3, Revenue, will meet tomorrow. We'll take up, believe we only have one bill assigned to us, House Bill 65, County Tax Protest Filing Date. Mr. President, we will meet in W6, and it'll be upon the noon recess.
Thank you. Senator Anderson, we'll go back to floor leader right after that. Senator Anderson.
Mr. President, I failed to remember to announce to the committee that there is 5 boxes for lunch in the lunchroom that are for you. Go ahead and eat before you come to the meeting. Thank you.
Very good. Let's go to Chairman Appropriations, Senator Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your Appropriations Committee number 2 committee will meet upon noon recess after the caucus, so 15 minutes after caucus is out to take up the following bills. House Bill 42 engrossed local government distributions, House Bill 59 workers' compensation COVID-19, House Bill 79 engrossed employment support fund amendments.
Okay, let's do this before we go to the vote. Senator Driscoll, give us a recap here.
Mr. Chairman, first, your committee number 7, Corporations, will meet in W110 tomorrow morning at 8 to take up House Bill 49 engrossed, House Bill 52, House Bill 80, and House Bill 87.
Okay, thank you. And then the caucus information again?
We will go to caucus immediately on adjournment. And with that, I would move we stand recessed until 2:30 p.m.
Okay, and just a reminder, bring your the material that was emailed to you for caucus. Okay. All right. Thank you, Senator Driscoll, and you heard the motion. I'll